So it's called Bad Luck, and it's written from the daughter's point of view. Mara's mother clutches the pendant in the well of her breasts, a golden guardian angel she's had since communion. Her head is wrapped in the black foulard of mourning. The streets are crowded with whispers and the shuffling of feet, a funeral procession passing beyond the gathered women and men who stare with faces broken with grief. Some step forward to touch her mother's elbow, saying, "We're sorry, Liliana. He was a good man, Giorgio was." Mara nods to a woman who cups her chin and offers a face lined with disappointment while saying, "You behave for your mother now. A girl has her reputation, and without a father." Another old woman cuts her off, her hand making a sharp gesture. She's wrapped in a black shawl, which she rearranges over her head as she lifts her arm in a gesture Mara understands only with her feelings. There are no bells ringing, but the funeral turns toward the piazza, and Mara sees the men from the mill waiting, removing their wool caps as the hearse arrives, and holding a fist to their temple in salute. "I am so unlucky," her mother says to no one in particular. "It's bad luck to replace a lost wedding band. I should have told Giorgio not to bother to buy me a new one." Mara squeezes her mother's hand. Bad luck. Black cats, a hat on the table, salt spilled on the floor, an umbrella open in the house. Mara thinks it's bad luck to grow up without a father, to be born during wartime, to be on the wrong side of strong. Mara remembers things not in chronology. It's as if her father was cut loose from time and drifting like trash in the sea, billowing and gleaming with the reflected sunlight, moving further offshore with the currents, tossed and rolled by the crest of a wave. He appears now as a young man she never met, now as a soldier in a uniform. Sometimes he's an older man with a set chin and dark eyebrows. Sometimes he's dressed in a tuxedo, as if emerging from a fantasy of tropical hotels ringing with Cuban jazz. At 5, Mara plays downstairs in the street, close, like her nonna wants her to, near the front portals of the apartment building. Her building is one of the few that hasn't cracked like bread crust with the heat of the bombs. The sound of an army truck rises above the scraping of shovels, above the usual cries of women calling to each other from balconies as they hang laundry and talk about letters from their husbands at the front. A nub of chalk leaves powdery smears on Mara's fingers, tucked in the seam of her white school apron pocket. In school, the teacher said, "The Americans are here, now we can afford a little leniency." Mara wastes the gift of leniency on the asphalt, drawing large squares and circles on the cracked bubbles. She jumps with one leg, then two, her shoes hitting the pavement with flat sounds, and she's flipped a full turn when she sees a man with an army backpack slung on his back. He wears a green jacket tied by the sleeves around his waist, a stained wife beater, and khaki pants. Where his mouth and chin should be, there's a thick black beard clinging to his cheekbones and creeping down his neck. "Un soldato," says someone from above. "One of ours?" The soldier's uniform, all dusty and torn, makes Mara think of rioting in Piazza Bovio, when men crashed storefronts with cudgels. It reminds her of crying women dressed in black and whispering old men chewing on the ends of an unlit pipe, their caps pulled tight down their foreheads, their eyes moving from side to side as if to spot a rabid dog. It reminds her of the corpses she saw bobbing face down in the water once, before her mother took her away to the farm. The soldier tilts his head towards the boys. He tips the visor of a hat he isn't wearing, then slowly turns to take in his surrounding, readjusting his army bag on his shoulder, his knees bending a little with the effort. And then he looks at Mara again. He has blue eyes, like hers, but not like a German's. His are blue of bruises, webbed in violet and dull, like grief. In a sweet tenor voice, the soldier asks if she's Liliana's child. He speaks to her the way old people sometimes do when reaching for her cheek with fingers like pincers, saying, "I knew when you were this small." "Mara?" His question is hesitant. She rolls the nub of chalk between her fingers and stares at him. When he speaks her name again, she winces, startled by his realness. Is your mother home? His voice is deep, too rich for the hunger tattooed on the bones that poke from his shoulders. When he steps towards her, she runs into the cool atrium of the lobby, her shoes click-clacking up the clean stone step, past the bucket still full with water and soap, past the sudsy mop, up, and up to the second-floor apartment. Her shouts trail after her, "Mama, mama, mama," through the rectangular well of the stairs. She's so small that she must tip on her toes in order to open the front door of the two-room apartment in Piombino, where she's lived with her mama since the war ended. "Mama, mama, there's a soldier downstairs, a man in uniform, very dirty." "A soldier? It's Giorgio," her aunt shouts from the closet where she's soaking laundry in a plastic bucket. Mara rushes back out to the landing, her hands grasping the balustrade as she tips on her toes and looks down, hoping maybe for the soldier to be gone. Women pour out of their homes, crowding the landings of each of the 6 floors, hats poked from the balustrade, scowling upside down, asking, "Chi è? Lo conosci? Uno nostro? Uno dei nostri?" Her mother comes up from behind, wraps her hands so tight on the balustrade that Mara sees her knuckles turn pale, cries, "Madonnina, it's your father." She bends almost in half, with one hand holding her stomach like it hurts, and her knees seem to bend unsteadily as she hurries down the stairs. Mara leans against her leg, the chalk in her mouth, her fingers pulling on her lip. She watches her mother embrace the birded soldier, her face disappearing into the crook of his neck, and the two of them sway like fronds in the breeze, the soldier's fingers meeting her mother's shoulder blades as he rushes urgent whispers into her ear. Mara curls her tongue around the chalk, tastes it without tasting it. Her arm breathes thickly from the threshold of the mop closet. "È Giorgio, è lui!" Some of the women shake their heads and somberly return to their apartments with their apron pockets empty of hope, while others say, "Ah, at least the Catini boy came back alive." In the thick of war, when the radio crackled with the voice of Mussolini declaring "Spezzeremo le reni alla Grecia," and Italian troops sailed off to Greece, Mara lived in the country with her grandfather, Egisto. At night, the sky was always bloody, and the hills looked like the stooped backs of old factory workers. But at least there was food, a coarse bread made of dark grain that she dipped in a finger of wine to soften. No mills to attract the airplanes, no bombs whistling and walls rumbling day and night, like in Piombino. Only the hunger to remind her, only the tough crust of the bread that tasted like disappointment, like loneliness and fear. From that time, she remembers the clucking of 2 scraggly chickens that roosted in trees. She remembers geese, a watery soup that her nonna slow cooked all day, the snails that Mara plucked from the long blades of grass, growing around the path she walked every morning. And there's another memory, skipping stones to scare away a thin stray dog when the ground popped at her feet, turf spraying on her ankles. Her clean white socks splattered with a shower of dirt. Pop, pop, pop. "Corri, corri!" Her nonno Egisto shouts. He swoops her up in his arm and hurries down the hill, still crying, "Run, run!" as if forgetting that her legs are wrapped around his waist already, her weight in his arms slowing them down. Behind them, men in uniform load their guns and fire, fear ripping open her chest with the muted popping of their weapons. She hears the click right before the earth explodes again around Egisto's feet. The women gather in the living room every Thursday night, with old grocery bags filled with cotton thread and needles. Threads of her father's story slip from the women's mouth in slow and deliberate loops, like the rosettes that appear between Mara's fingers from the cotton sifting around her crochet needle. They talk to her like she's a child, hearing about Red Riding Hood. There were 2 brothers, Giorgio, who's your father, and Tommaso, who was the oldest, the barber. Tommaso was political, you know how barbers like to talk, discussing politics while he's steaming towels, lathering up faces with foam. He even had a press in the back of the shop. And Giorgio, stupido, the cousin shrugs, her voice bending her father's name with a musical lilt. He wanted to do what his older brother did, so he went to the streets and he passed out the flyers. She pops forward, the needle clanging from her lap onto the floor. But he didn't know how to recognize the fastest from the others, and so And Aunt tells Mara, don't go telling your friends about this now. So what, Mara thinks? Everyone's father is a ghost. A soldier on the front, a letter, a patriot, a victim of Hitler or Mussolini, or else a communist or a socialist on the run, a red. The aunts say, it's not something you want to talk about. Your father going to jail? Una ragazza per bene doesn't want it known. Her father was a red. You want a clean reputation. And yet, in her aunt's voice, she detects a sweet, faint lilt, like in a song, even as the warning is sharp, reminding her, tell no one of this. It's our business. And your mother, says the cousin, shrugging again, like the ghost of a great-grandmother is sitting there, whispering, don't say it. She used to go to the jailhouse with a picnic basket, with the other women from the resistance, and they'd sit on the grass and sing Bella Ciao or Quel mazzolin di fiori. Her aunt puckers her lip and she sings the last part, batting her eyelashes at the ceiling. But they changed the words, you see. They worked them into codes so that they could tell each other who was arrested, who escaped, who was killed, you know. That way they could send each other messages. Aunt Marta folds her lips, squints at the crochet needle, says, that disgraziata! She was already pregnant with you. Her fingertips fold closed, her hands bobbing. Mara feels the words clutching her chest, pulling on her tummy. She was there, too, a swelling under her mother's apron, a promise between them. And a worry, a kick from inside, perhaps, when the prison guards loaded their guns and shot at her feet, saying, go picnic somewhere else. This isn't a place for mothers. Often Giorgio wakes them all up at night, gasping, choking on his own shouts about the rolling tanks. He says his fingers are burning and he holds his hands up and stares at them without seeing them, the fingers curled like claws on his face, acting independently. Mara stands in the doorway, the light from behind her elongating her shadow. What is it now? Go back to sleep, Mara. I can't sleep with him screaming like that. Her mother, with her arms still coiled around the heavy-breathing soldier, strokes his head with, shh, you're scaring la bambina, see? Mara tries to think of him as her father, her babbo, but he's Giorgio, the soldier, the stranger. He screams that night. Her mother pushes aside her blanket. The sigh from her lips is almost enough to tell Mara too much about intimacy between men and women. Her long, naked feet slap on the cold tile. He's only dreaming, Mother coos, her hand light on her head. But the soldier's eyes are wide open, shiny with fear, chiseled and sharp, glowing with dread in the pitch dark. The door closes shut on him. Her mother's breath smells of chamomile. Her robe is woolly and hopeful, with perpetually blooming marigolds. But Mara carries the image of the soldier to bed with her, his shining eyes bubbling sprays of dirt. His head, shaved to the skin of his skull, seems bloodless, the bones protruding stubbornly and tapering off at his temples and high forehead, as though the whole of his bones cling to his soul, his famine tortured, fatless muscle tissue and tendons, keeping him anchored into his nightmares, the ghost of his mysterious war pushing into life from under his stark, exhausted skin. The mouth open and dry and black inside with German curses follow both Mara and her mother to the sofa in the living room, where Mara sleeps alone. The war takes things from children: white bread, meat for dinner, gifts as Christmas and birthdays, a home shattered in one roaring breath by bombs, the sense of safety in a grandfather's embrace, and of course, fathers. When her mother clings to the sweating Giorgio, her hurried whispers exchanged against his panic-infused shouts, Mara knows her mother is taken too. It goes on, but I hope you'll look it up. Thank you.